I'm going to be talking to you today about Open Data Blend, which is a modern and scalable open data service or set of open data services that have been put together to deal with some of the, the frequent challenges that you see when working with UK open data that is large and sometimes complex. So, first of all, I'll reintroduce myself. So I'm an analytics consultant, a principal analytics consultant at NimbleLearn, which is an analytics consultancy company. And I have over 13 years of broad experience in data analytics across different industries, different verticals. And I'm Microsoft certified in a lot of these technologies, things such as Power BI and SQL Server analysis services. I mean, if that's your kind of space, you might be familiar with some of those technologies. Now, we've started working with frictionless data quite a few years ago. It was about 2014 when we started looking at the open data landscape and seeing what was really happening in that space. And one thing that caught our eye at the time was the Frictionless Data Project and how it was enabling people to combine data and provide it with rich metadata to allow it to be reused. And not too many years after discovering frictionless data and understanding the value proposition and how useful it was, we had a go at delivering a library called Data Package M, which is a library that allows you to use Power Query to pull data into Excel and Power BI. And it leverages the frictionless data, metadata, or the data package spec. Then following that, we took Data Package M and we used it to create something called a custom connector in Power BI. And what that does is it enables you to use the native get data experience within Power BI to very quickly find data packages once you've given it a URL, and then look at the various resources within it, which will be presented as tables, and then pick which ones you want to load into Power BI. Sometimes you could go ahead and load it straight into Power BI and start analyzing it, but with some data, you might also decide to transform it to get it into a shape that you want before you start your analysis. And lastly, as part of our frictionless data journey, one of the things that we did was put together the compression of resources pattern, which you can probably see now if you were to go to the frictionless data patterns area of the website. So that kind of covers the frictionless data journey and what we've kind of done in the space so far, and that is as NimbleLearn. Now, today I'm actually talking to you about Open Data Blend, which is actually a NimbleLearn project, but it has a sole focus of dealing with some of these common open data challenges. So one of them is large data volume. So it focuses on the open data that is out there that is difficult to manage due to its size, and also the problem of overwhelming complexity. So, I mean, there's lots of open data out there. Now, we're by no means trying to address all of the open data or anything like that, but we do focus on a subset of open data that has already been proven to be of high value. And another challenge that this project focuses on is the fact that data is often provided in a format that isn't optimal for data analysis. For example, you might get a table that's been provided in a PDF file, or you might get a lot of information about the data presented in a Word document. And I guess one of the last challenges that we kind of wanted to deal with is the fact that a lot of times you do get companies or organizations that aggregate the data and refine it and add value, but that normally comes with the kind of cost of them closing that data, which then means they've refined the data, they've made it easier to use, but then they've made it closed. So you can't use it for any purpose and you have to pay in order to use it. So Open Data Blend is focused on making large and complex UK open data easier to use. Now, like I said, there's a lots of open data out there, and to try and address this problem for every single data set is impossible. And because you have to take a kind of an approach whereby you deal with one data set at a time and understand it in order to then add value to it and refine it, we've targeted some of the more popular UK open data sets that we know people are already using and that we know already have a lot of value and have the challenges that have been mentioned previously. So the initial focus is England prescriptions, MOT tests, and road safety. So if you were to go to opendatablend.io, those are the data sets that you will see. There are some other data sets that kind of support the analysis of these primary data sets, but that is our focus at the moment. And over time, we will add more data sets. So the goal of the project is to simplify data acquisition and support the actual understanding of that data, because it's one thing to get the data, but once you have it, if you don't know how to use it, or you don't understand how to join it up, or you don't understand the context of the various columns, then you can't really get any value from it. And another area where we want to kind of help is in making it faster to get data insights. So we enrich the data and we do things to accelerate that transition from having data to actually being able to deliver valuable insights with it. And we're aiming to do all of this while keeping the data open, which means all of our data sets are openly licensed. Now, Open Data Blend has two highly scalable services. One of them is a bulk data service called Open Data Blend Datasets. And this service is actually built pretty much on top of the frictionless specs. And you're going to see in a moment what I mean by that. The second service is a business intelligence model as a service called Open Data Blend Analytics. And the idea of that service is that you'll be able to connect BI tools like Power BI, Tableau, Excel, and be able to interactively analyze the data. And you're going to learn a bit more about that shortly. Now, having a project like this and kind of building something like this is somewhat expensive. So we have had to make sure that the project deals with the monetization aspect as well for sustainability purposes. But all of our pricing plans, if you do go into that direction, are all reasonably priced and they kind of scale with usage. Right, so let's focus on Open Data Blend datasets first. So with Open Data Blend datasets, you have two interfaces. You have the Open Data Blend Dataset API, and then you also have the Open Data Blend Dataset UI. So naturally, the API is aimed at people who are more proficient with code, who deal with APIs. So these can be data scientists, data engineers, and web developers or programmers who, are just enthusiastic about working with data. Now, regardless of what interface you use, the design has been done in such a way that it's easy to navigate through the catalog. So it's easy to navigate through the catalog programmatically or through the UI. And something that's quite important about the actual data that we package and deliver through it is because we have pre-processed it, you get it in formats that aren't available at the source. So the format that is the most prevalent one is CSV, but obviously, because we know that CSVs can be quite bulky in terms of size, they are all gzip compressed, but you can preview a subset of the data before actually downloading it. And then the other two formats that are commonly associated with big data and data analytics are ORC and Parquet. And these are both columnar optimized formats, which means that they are compressed in such a way that they can be analyzed very quickly. And if you're using platforms like AWS Athena or Synapse Analytics, Azure Synapse Analytics or Google BigQuery, you can actually land these files into your cloud storage or data store or data lake and query them interactively as though they were tables. The Open Data Blend dataset service is both free and paid. The free aspect is that you can download, I think there's a limit of about 8 files per month, but the files can be quite large, which is why I've kind of had to balance between allowing you to download files, but also, balance it with the costs as well. And the paid services, once again, they scale with usage. Now, when I say data set, you can also swap that out for data package, because our data sets are effectively data packages. But data set is a terminology that people would typically use when working with data of this nature. And to the right hand side, you can see a snippet of the metadata for one of the data packages or data sets. This one is the English prescribing one, which has the various properties that are associated with the data package, the data resource, and the table schema frictionless specs. Also, we've incorporated some of the frictionless patterns, specifically the data catalog pattern, whereby you have an entry point to then list all of the available data packages and then kind of go to iterate through and go to those. And also the compression of resources pattern as well, which is what we've used effectively by having the gzip compressed CSV files. One of the reasons why we actually chose to use the frictionless data specs is because by implementing these standardized specs, you benefit from a plethora of tools. So I think at the moment there are about 10 languages that are supported. And one of these languages is Python, and we've kind of leveraged that and the fact that a lot of the data engineering and data science is done using Python. So we've actually created a simple extract and load tool that interfaces with our Dataset API, and it builds on top of the Python frictionless framework library to allow developers, data scientists, or what have you, whoever's working with this tool, to intelligently cache copies of our data sets locally. And when I say intelligently cache, what I mean is once you pull a data set, it checks the metadata to see whether you've got a local copy. And if you try and pull it again, it will actually use the local version of it rather than having to go back to the internet. This is an example of the Open Data Blend for Python tool being used. And you can see that with just a few lines of code, you can install it using pip install. If you're familiar with Python, you'll know what that is. And combining it with other available packages such as pandas, which is common for data analysis in Python, and pyarrow, which is what you would use when working with, for example, Parquet files, which are compressed. You can quickly, in a few lines of code, specify the endpoint for the data package and then specify what you want in terms of the resource, so the resource name, and then it will pull it down and it will give you a reference to where it's landed to, which you can then use within something like pandas or some other tool within Python to load that data. So the Open Data Blend Dataset UI has a different target audience. It's obviously aimed at people who don't necessarily want to write code. It's the broadest audience, and so we've made the interface simple and intuitive to use. So it's a simple interface. It presents metadata such as the licensing information, comprehensive column metadata, what are the sizes of the columns, what data types are in there, what is a description of its contents. And you've also got links to the source data in case you want to actually verify it with the source or go and do something with the raw data yourself. And also useful links such as linking to relationship diagrams, which help you to understand the actual data and how it hangs together. And here you can see a few screenshots of the UI. So starting from left to right and top to bottom, you've got what is effectively your entry point, which is the catalog, which lists the various available data sets. Then you've got an actual page for a data set. And as you scroll through that page of that data set, you'll see the various data files that are available to download in one of those three formats, and you'll be able to preview the data as well as read the metadata about the various columns. Now, moving on to Open Data Blend Analytics. As mentioned previously, this is a BI model as a service or business intelligence model as a service. It surfaces the same data that's available in the data sets. So you could actually use a combination of both services. You could use the Open Data Blend Analytics service to quickly explore the data, but then you decide that you need the data in bulk for some purpose, and you can go and use the Open Data Blend Dataset API to actually pull the data in bulk. Naturally, if you're just a data analyst and you just want to deal with the ability to create insights and reports, you can just work with this analytics service to quickly query and build reports in tools like Excel, Power BI, and Tableau. And because of its nature, because of the infrastructure behind it, this is a paid only service. And in a moment, I'm going to show you some slides that have some animated GIFs that give you an idea of what the experience is like in each of the three mentioned tools. Now, I only mention these three tools, but there are actually several other tools that can also be used to connect to this service. So here you can see a animated GIF of the experience in Excel. And here, this is just very quickly looking at some anonymized MOT data. It's using the drag and drop experience of Excel pivot tables, and it's slicing that data down by time. So first by year, then quarter, and then by day. And you can see here, there's a very similar experience in Power BI as well. Once again, you're navigating through the listed items in the model, and then you're able to drag and drop and build your reports up to basically find your insights. Now, you can imagine doing this versus having to download a file, load it into a tool, model it somehow and analyze it. This is an order of magnitude faster. And that is one of the goals of this project, to actually speed up the time it takes to go from having data to actually being able to get insights from it. This example here is just showing a similar experience in Tableau. But ultimately, regardless of which one of these free tools you were to use, you would have the same experience whereby you are able to drag and drop and analyze the data in seconds, as opposed to minutes, hours, days, weeks, or even months. So that's it. So thank you for listening. If you want to find out more about Open Data Blend, you can go to opendatablend.io. You can also follow us on Twitter, whereby you'll learn about articles that we publish, or news related to Open Data Blend or other things in the space. So with that, I'll hand back over to Sarah.